land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the lands of Anishinaabe Nation. This spot where we gather is the traditional lands of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. We also recognize that this land is now home to the Delaware Nation. This land was settled through the McKee Purchase Treaty of 1790, and we as beneficiaries of the treaty must recognize our responsibilities, including our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Mr. Mayor, we do not have a supplementary agenda this evening. We have two disclosures of pecuniary interest. Councillor Hall and Councillor Wright with regards to item 19D, the 2022 record of payment to council-owned vendors. We do not have any deputations this evening, and now we'll review the consent agenda. For the consent agenda, the items that have been pulled are items 15A, changes to the procedural bylaw relating to deputations, pulled by Councillor Story. Items 15B, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice strategy, update number 5, pulled by Councillor Crew and Councillor Brock McGregor. Item 16A, employment services transformation, pulled by Councillor Brock McGregor. Item 17B, the Sylvie Park Ball Diamond update, pulled by Councillor Sakachi. 17D, the motion of Councillor Anderson regarding Wheatley Arena improvements, pulled by Councillor Anderson and Councillor Sakachi. Item 18A, Together CK Grant 2023 funding recommendations, pulled by Councillor Finn, Story, Sakachi, and Jubenville. Item 18B, the Fergie Jenkins statue unveiling ceremony, pulled by Councillor Story and Councillor Jubenville. Item 18C, the veteran memorial renovations, pulled by Councillor Story. Item 19D, the 2022 record of payment for council-owned vendors due to a conflict of interest, pulled by Hall and Wright. And finally, report 20C, the site plan control application of 21055 Charing Cross Road, community of Charing Cross, pulled by Councillor Thompson. Therefore, the following reports will be approved in the consent agenda. Items 13A, B, C, D, 14A, B, 16B, 17A and C, 18D, E, F, 19A, B, C, E, F, and G, and 20A, B, D, E, F, G, and 21A.
Councillor Hall and Councillor Finn, can I get you to move the consent agenda, please?
So moved, Mayor Kenneth.
So seconded.
Any questions? Oh, Councillor Story.
Now that I see 20C is pulled, I have a conflict on that. Is that the site plan application in Charing Cross Road?
Sorry, item 20C, site plan control application for Charing Cross Road.
Yes.
You have a conflict?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll pull that also for the conflict so we can vote on that separately.
Thank you.
20C?
Yes, it's already pulled by Thompson, yeah.
All right. Noted. Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Item 15, corporate services.
15A, changes to procedural bylaw relating to deputations.
Councillor Story and Councillor Thompson, can I get you to put this on the floor, please? Actually, Councillor Story, I'll go to you first, and then Councillor Thompson can second.
Oh my gosh. I have a case of the Mondays. Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I appreciate working with the clerk's office to move this forward and the feedback of the Accessibility Advisory Committee regarding deputations to council. This will ensure that everyone can have their voices heard at the chamber, so I appreciate everyone's help with that. So I'd like to make an amendment that section, do I read the amendment? Sorry. Do I read the amendment out?
Yes, please.
Okay. That's section 7.9 FB. Deputations will be accepted in the following formats, be amended to read in written format, the author's name will be included in the minutes as deputations received.
Councillor Thompson, will you second that?
Happy to second it as amended.
Councillor Story, anything else you want to add?
No, thank you. I just appreciate the help in moving this forward. Thank you.
Judy, go ahead.
If I have the correct understanding, I think she just moved an amendment and we don't have the main motions moved yet. So because she's moving it, if we can just move 1 and 2 in addition to the section that she would like to add.
Are you okay with that?
Sure, thank
Councilor
you.
Thompson? All right,
Yes.
perfect. Any questions? Seeing none, I will put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0. 15B, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Strategy, Update Number 5.
This is an information report, and Councillor Crew and Councillor B. McGregor had questions. So Councillor Crew and then Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. My question would be probably for Kathy. I've been involved with this strategy from the beginning, and I just want to also say there's been a lot of really good work that has come from this, and we need to, this is a living document and a living thing that we need to continue on. One of my concerns, though, as we sit and we're developing this strategy, how are we going to fund this? I think Rebecca has done that position in October. And then as all good work that doesn't have a keeper, it ends up shelved. And this is not something that we should be shelving, or we need to make sure that this continues on. How are we going to do that? And are we planning on asking for any budget dollars in the future?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor Crew. So maybe first to answer the question, we do have our 2 currently dedicated staff resources, both Amrit Kaira, who her contract finishes with us at the end of March, actually, so coming up in just a couple of days. And then Rebecca's contract that she's in as the coordinator does expire at the end of October of this year. So our intention right now, we're in the planning stages still right now, as you will have seen from the report, and then we'll be developing what will be the sustainability strategy. We expect that the sustainability strategy will require some budget commitments, and so that will come forward to council for the multi-year budget, and we would hope that you would consider that at that point in time so that we can make sure that the diversity, equity, inclusion, justice strategy doesn't live at the side of someone's desk going forward.
Thank you, Kathy. And I just want to say thank you to Amrit for all the work that she's done, and Rebecca as well. There's been a ton of good work, and you know, when I read the report and it was like April, we started this last April, so it's been a year that we have done all of this work, and I felt like we were constantly being hammered at for meetings, but you know, when you look back at all the work, it took a lot of work for those young women to get us going in a direction that made sense. So congratulations to them, and thank you.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Agree with Councillor Crew, and it's good to hear the answer about some sustainability funding, and that we'll have that opportunity to support that when we get to the multi-year budget process. Just wanted to thank you for the report. I think it's really helpful that we continue to see these, and it's been something that to have it in front of you on a consistent basis really adds to that awareness, and it's great to see that awareness growing in the community as well. I know Pattern Energy recently highlighted the work that's going on within the municipality, and when you're starting to get recognition from organizations outside of just our municipal structure, I think that speaks to how important this is in the community. Did also want to point out the inclusion now of the DEIJ component in reports to council, and already it'll actually be on the next report. I found it really helpful to have that component, and is another thing to think about when we're getting into the decision making. And I know, while it's a small thing in a report, it is a lot of work, and it is going to make a difference, and I'm glad to see it happening. So thank you.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, and through the mayor, I just wanted to thank all, and Rebecca and Amrit. I too have been a part of this since the inception, and you know, I thought I knew a lot of things before I started in attending these meetings, and I'm amazed at what I've learned along the way and what I still have yet to learn. I know that that's a never-ending educational piece, and probably a very important educational piece for counselors. So I hope when it does come back, and at that point of time, that there is support around the table, because I know from even from the last meeting that I attended, there's still a lot of work ahead in bringing the plan to council when it comes to that point. But again, thank you for all that have put in the work and that have been bringing the meetings together, not only for councillors who attend, but for all the employees that have had the opportunity to attend, and finding a space to be able to share stories and feel comfortable and move on and find a way to make our employment for everybody a great place to be here at the municipality. And I think that work has brought a lot to the table and is being identified, and it is a great way to be moving in the future. So thanks.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll move on to the next item, 16, Community Human Services.
16A, Employment Services Transformation.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just had a couple of questions, and I think these are for Matt Keach if he's online. Okay. So the first question, when we go through that report, there's a mention of the increase in OW case rates, the projection over the next couple of years. And I'm just wondering, is that something that's a trend unique to Chatham-Kent? Is that something we're seeing across the province? Because it's a little concerning if that's a trend we're seeing, and that's a provincial trend, and we're also seeing a reduction in funding towards these programs. Those aren't really concepts that jive so well together.
Mr. Mayor, we have Polly Smith and Matt Keach are online, and so I will turn it over. I don't know who is going to speak first, but they will jump in and answer Councillor McGregor's questions.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, and thank you, Councillor McGregor, for the question. The Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services Social Assistance Caseload Forecast uses actual social assistance data and labor market trends and the unemployment rate forecast of the Ministry of Finance. So this is a forecast of what the caseload level would be if assumed economic and policy conditions prevail in the current and next fiscal years. The ministry, though, does not produce a caseload forecast at the local level that reflects local economic conditions. The ministry only produces a forecast of the Ontario Works caseload at the provincial level. So this is, there are some assumptions here, and that this would apply to the province.
Great, thank you. The other question I had was, can you expand a little bit on the impact of the end of the social services support funding? So I know we've had a challenging few years, and that funding's been really important, not just from a sort of a social good aspect, but also from a budget impact as well. So can you expand on the outcomes, the impacts of the end of that funding?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's Polly Smith, Director of Employment and Social Services. I'd like to weigh in on that one. The Social Services Relief Fund was provided by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing to provide stability supports during the pandemic. That funding, as you noted, has ended at the end of December. For us in Chatham-Kent, some of the funding went out to community partners to keep them providing services or get new provisions of services where they couldn't be met by certain partners that weren't able to continue. Other partners picked up the work. For us, though, a lot of the fund went to funding the shelters, the emergency shelter at the Bradley Centre, then the next one at Travelodge, and now where we are currently at Victoria Park Place. Every year we put in reserves, but put in to fund these and those services by reserves, but we used that fund. This year we will be requiring those reserves.
Thank you. Thank you. The other thing that sort of struck me in the report is, we've talked about it around this table a little bit before, about the inadequacy of social supports, whether it's ODSP or OW, and the OW in particular, that's been frozen since 2018. We know we've faced some significant inflationary pressures in recently. So that 733 from 2018, what would that number need to be now to have the same buying power? And maybe that's a question for Gord.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, and thank you for the question. So, yeah, I took a look at the Bank of Canada. They have a calculator to help with this, and $733 in 2018 is now $855, and that's an average of 3.12% CPI over those 5 years.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note that a lot of people that are receiving these services in reality have experienced a net decrease of over $120 to what they receive each month when we think about buying power. So when we see the increased costs that we're facing as a municipality, a lot of those are outcomes of inadequate social supports, and we've seen that those costs for us continue to increase. I don't see a trend that's going to reverse those, and yet we're seeing some changes in funding that are going to put more strain on municipal taxpayers and on municipalities. I think it's also important to note, on the heels of the last report, the DEIJ section in this report demonstrates that disproportionately affects people in equity-seeking groups. So effectively, what this report tells me, and there's lots of good work in it about how we have to transition and look at different ways to deliver services, is that we're seeing decreases in funding to support services to the people that need it most, and that's going to have a significant impact, not only on them, but on us as well. So I hope that we can see this trend reverse, and I certainly appreciate the good work that's going on by frontline providers to make sure that we're still supporting people as best we can with what currently is pretty limited resources. Thank you.
Move on to item 17, infrastructure and engineering services. Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Thank you, Dr. Redek, as well, for the call this weekend. That was helpful. I don't really have any questions about the actual report. Just had one quick question regarding kind of next steps. So this was very helpful, kind of, presenting us through the process. I guess after a year or so, when this is kind of doing its thing and your team is seeing how things work, do you think that you would be bringing something forward to kind of, letting us know if there's, we need support or resolutions of council to try to, see the challenges with this? Or are we going to be updated in like a year to see how the process is going? I know it's out of our hands, but I'm just curious to see if you'll be providing something like this once it's had a chance to kind of run its course, or if you need direction to do that.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Thank you for the question, Councillor Sakachi. I actually think that's a great idea. This is a very new program for the entire province. So as Employment Ontario really rolls out across the province, it will impact areas differently. So we can put that in the calendar to look at bringing something back. Now, bearing in mind that final transition to Employment Ontario doesn't happen until 2024. So it could be, we might see some things really quickly, but it also might take a bit of time. So, but we can get something earmarked for even 6 to 8 months into the new program and bring a report back to council.
Thank you. As we conversated, I do have a lot of concerns, but I guess it's better to see it implemented and see how it goes. I would just hope that if your team, who is very boots on the ground, don't feel it's working, that council provides the strongest voice as well as Mayor Caniff and administration to try to get the changes, because I think that there are going to be some challenges. So thank you.
We'll move on to item 17, infrastructure and engineering services.
17B, Sylvay Park Ball Diamond Update.
Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I will be moving the report with also adding a number 2. If I can get a seconder, as number 2 being, as one option, administration further investigate the potential of locating new ball diamonds on the municipally owned lands currently identified as no site alteration zone by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks along Highland Drive in Blenheim Business Park area.
Councillor Thompson.
Love to second it.
Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'll keep my comments rather brief. I do want to thank Mayor Caniff as well as the team. I know Mayor Caniff, you've been very instrumental in at least trying to look. I've received a lot of calls and concerns from the softball leagues in Blenheim. We have a very, very strong league. I think one of the biggest ones in Chatham-Kent. I have made sure I was letting them know that we are trying. In conversations in the past, over the last 4.5 years, I've been very much an advocate for the Blenheim Business Park. Recently, we've discussed it here. It hasn't really found a pathway forward. It might not. The permit application fees might be something that to find a resolution might be very challenging. Knowing that it's already a municipally owned parcel that's serviced, and we have the opportunity to maybe come together and work together to identify a conservation area maybe, as well as securing sites for some ball diamonds, I think it would be very beneficial. And just quick comments to Mr. McAllister, if he feels that that site, if there is no path forward for an industrial aspect, if that would be, feasible in his mind.
Thank you, Your Worship. I certainly support this recommendation as moving forward to give us some direction to have those conversations further with the ministry. I can't sit here today and tell you it will happen, but I think it's another alternative that we can have that discussion with them. It might be more palatable to move forward with some sort of concept, whether it's ball diamonds and some, like you mentioned, some conservation components to it as well.
And I see it as a positive because we're potentially, investing more industry in Chatham-Kent to a different alternate site, and maybe just kind of having a trade-off there. And I can't take this one personally, but maybe the first game, if those comes to fruition, it could be the Bobo Lynx versus the Fox Snakes.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0. 17D, motion by Councillor Anderson regarding Wheatley Arena improvements.
Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Did I just read it? Whereas Wheatley Area Arena has served as a critical community building for shelter, information, entertainment, and social gathering for years, and whereas since the downtown explosion, the use of the Wheatley Legion Hall and or the Car Barn Hall have not been an option anymore, the Wheatley Area Arena has been the only area to gather. Whereas opportunities exist to rejuvenate the aging facility to be more accessible, welcoming, and inspiring to Wheatley residents, be it resolved that administration, in consultation with the public, develop a plan for achievable improvements to Wheatley Area Arena over short and medium term, with the goal to improve accessibility, aesthetics, and overall experience of patrons, and that this plan be returned to council for funding consideration through the capital plan, life cycle plan, grants, fundraising, or through other sources that may become available.
Councillor Scotchy, will you second that?
Yes, happy to second that, Mayor Caniff.
Councillor Anderson, then over to you, Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Scotchy. It was brought, there's been a lot of, unsettling news with, the people of Wheatley hearing that, the CK was looking to purchase, specifically the Legion and the Car Barn uptown. Those were the only two other buildings that were really spaces to rent and gather as a community. The Legion, I spoke with some people from there, and they're like, we would love to utilize the arena space, but 90% of our patrons can't walk up the stairs to get to the second floor. And it really made me think about, other people as well. As a mom, I carried my stroller up those stairs. There's no wheelchair accessible bathroom that's able to use, and we also had a hockey coach from Lakeshore come in, and he was in a wheelchair, and you couldn't see the ice surface because there's nowhere raised for them to even see the ice surface if you're in a wheelchair. So I think, it's the year 2023. I think that, providing a space that is in the municipality that's accessible to everyone and is important. And I further think that, as far as it goes for Wheatley and the citizens of Wheatley, you know, we need a place to gather that everyone can gather at, and I think that this is the best way to do it. The recreation center, it's the Wheatley Area Recreation Center. It has splash pad. It now has the new arboretum out back for walking trails. It has baseball diamonds, tennis courts, soccer fields. You know, there's public washrooms that are accessible from outside as well that could use updating. I mean, I just think if we're going to really want to expand this portion, which is the needs and wants of the people of Wheatley and surrounding community, that there's an opportunity here for us to do better.
Councillor Story? Councillor Scotchy, then Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'm definitely not going to disagree with anything Councillor Anderson said. I commend her support for her community. The questions I have, I'm not sure if this will be going to Mr. Solder or to Mr. Quinton. I guess once this motion, if it is supported, how is it going to look like the funding consideration through the capital plan? You know, in speaking of a very, adamant advocate for all minor sports here in the municipality. I know that a lot of our arenas could use this exact, these aspects, and I just wanted to see how that would look in the capital plan of things, because I definitely understand, we've heard the same concerns about the Civic Center, Accessibility Act as accessibility as well. So just looking at the capital plan, how that is going to be supported, and if this would be kind of bumping something up, or it would still follow the same type of dynamics as we normally do.
Thank you, Your Worship, to the councillor. Earlier tonight on section 14B, actually, council approved the hiring of a consultant to do the asset management plan. That asset management plan is going to look at the longer term life cycle needs and the capital needs for all of our assets, all arenas across the municipality. And through that process, we'll be prioritizing what we're going to bring forward through the multi-year budget in the following years once it's done. It will take some time for us to get through the asset management plan. I think some of the items that the councillor was referring to are more short-term needs that are required there at the arena. So looking at doing an accessibility review for some of those short-term improvements is something we'll look at over the course of the next couple of months, and hopefully we can put that forward through the capital and life cycle budget process for next year. But they all have to be looked at overall from equity perspective across all arenas in Chatham-Kent.
Thanks, and I do appreciate the equity side of things. I guess, would we be having that assessment of, shouldn't we be having all that assessment on all of our, if we're going to be doing one, arena, I think that it would be beneficial for us to be looking at all different aspects of being as, we just talked about inclusion, obviously, and how important it is in our community. I've seen the same struggle at multiple arenas throughout this season, especially, and just curious on how we were just going to be identifying one only, if it's going to be something that's going to be a lens that we're looking at all the communities, and if they're short-term and inexpensive solutions, I think it would be great for us to see those.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor, just to clarify, when we look at levels of service in our arenas, we do look at them from an equity lens, and through the asset management plan, we'll be applying that same lens to all the arenas as we move forward. The motion here before you is to look at potentially some different funding considerations as well, and we'll be doing that as in the same nature. So our consultant will go out, look at the needs of different arenas. They are different. Some of them don't have the same challenges as the others, and then coming back to council with that overall asset management plan.
Thank you.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I do support this motion, and I would like to state that I do agree we should be treating all arenas equally, but I do think when you have a community that has experienced the serious disaster that Wheatley has, I would support an exception to providing them more funding, to be perfectly frank, in this particular community, because they do have a special circumstance. But I do want to add, maybe to Edward, I think just a comment, if you could please include the Accessibility Advisory Committee in your plans for the arena, that would be great. Thank you.
Seeing no, Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Certainly appreciate the motion and recognize the challenge in Wheatley, and I guess I share a couple of the concerns of Councillor Sakachi, and I know I've been in, I think now 5 different arenas in Chatham-Kent in the last 4 weeks, and a lot of them share these issues, and a lot of them are used as community centers. I think about the use of Tilbury Arena during the weather issue. You know, in all communities, they act as community centers. So I'm really pleased that we're going out and we're going to do some of this work at all arenas. I'm a little worried about the precedent of kicking one to the front of the line before we get to like a capital project. It's not to say that it doesn't deserve that, and it's not to say it's not a really important thing to be doing, but we have these challenges really across the board, and it is difficult to prioritize one arena over others when, you know, we'll, I'm sure, after we go through this process, get those same concerns brought forward by, you know, residents in Wallaceburg or Dresden or Blenheim, and certainly in Chatham. So that's my one hesitation. Not that I don't think it's a good idea and something that needs to be done in the long term, but I'm concerned about how we prioritize communities over each other when so much work does need to get done.
Seeing no other questions. Sorry, Councillor Anderson, you'd like to final thoughts?
Thank you, and I can certainly appreciate all of the comments that were made here tonight. And you know, I guess when I think about, you know, you mentioned Tilbury Arena, it's accessible already. So even if it is used as a community center, it has a brand new hall attached to it, and it is accessible for anyone that's in a wheelchair or has any other mobility issues that they can access everything in that arena. And also, you know, any of these other communities that you talk about, they all have other gathering spaces. They have a Legion, or they have another hall, or they have something there that they can still use. Wheatley does not. And that is why this motion is brought forward in the beginning. I would never go out and ask for something that would be putting us above anyone else. This is a olive branch to say, like, this town just needs something to have a space that we can gather and be proud of. And if there's a short-term thing that we can do that can say, hey, yeah, this is gonna make, you know, things a little bit easier for the people of Wheatley. Like, the Sharks game was sold out, but the 5 spots that have a handicap sticker, like a handicap thing on them, were empty because those people know that they can't access the arena anyways once they're inside. So yeah, maybe I am asking for a little bit of special treatment when it comes to this motion, and I am asking for it to go to the top of the line, but I don't think it's an unreasonable ask.
Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I agree. I'm okay with prioritizing Wheatley considering their downtown blew up. It's a special circumstance, and should we do this all the time? No, but this isn't you know, a standard situation. And as a municipality, I think, yeah, we can do them the favor for what they've gone through in the last year or so. Like, I'll just sort of put it out that I think it's fine to do this and to prioritize it. And Wheatley's so far on the fringe of the municipality that I think this shows that they are a part of the municipality of Chatham-Kent, and we are prioritizing because of what they went through. So I'm more than comfortable with it. I think it's a great idea.
Seeing no other questions, comments, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Going to item 18, Chief Administrative Office.
18A, Together CK Grant 2023 funding recommendations.
Councillor Story and Councillor Scott, you gotta each move this, please.
Happy to move this, Mayor Caniff.
Second it, Mayor Caniff.
Okay, Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Amy, thank you for all of your work on this. They're obviously, judging by the number of applications, there was a lot of interest this year, and I'm really thrilled to see so many events and festivals returning to in-person events after obviously a very challenging couple of years. Is there anything that you can share with us? I know in a small community, there's always going to be, I mean, all of us around the table probably have connections to most of these events, if not all of them in our wards especially. When there's someone on the committee that maybe has a direct connection or perhaps a conflict with a decision, or sorry, with an applicant, can you please explain in general terms how that process works if there's anyone with a conflict with an application, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. So you're asking how are potential conflicts handled within the committee. So for those of you who may not be aware, the Together CK program is administered by Partnership Development, and applications are reviewed by the Review Committee. The Review Committee is composed of municipal staff as well as volunteer citizens. As you mentioned, there are times where either a municipal staff member or community member will have a conflict. The typical process is when I share with them the application information and the list of applicants, they will notify me at that time if there is a conflict. It's at that time they will not speak to that application nor score that application. Subsequently, when the committee then meets to review and discuss the applications, typically in person, this year was still virtual, that person during the conflict portion of the agenda will state that they have a conflict with what group or what application, and it's recorded in the meeting minutes.
Thank you very much, and a thanks to the committee members who donated their time to review these applications and move them forward. And I look forward to attending as many of them as I can. Thanks.
Councillor Finn, followed by Councillor Jubenville.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to Amy. Many calls and emails this week on that. I'd like to thank you and the committee. I know it's not an easy task, but could you explain the process just so that the public knows that just because you're submitting in for a request doesn't mean that you are going to get the funding?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Finn. You're asking for a summary of the process of the applications? Okay.
And how it's decided who gets the funding and how much?
Sure, I'll try to do the summary. So applications need to be received by a certain deadline. Once those applications are received as the grant administrator, I go through them and identify all the ones that have been received by the deadline or the ones that haven't. My job is then to go through those applications and review for the ones that are eligible or not eligible. Once I've done that, I share that information with the review committee, letting them know which applications are eligible and which are not eligible, then move forward to scoring. At that time, the review committee members each separately will review the applications and score them. There is different scoring criteria based on the application, whether it's an event versus a community project. And then they submit their scoring to me. As grant administrator, I collect those scorings and determine what the final score is. It's weighted for each person, and then place that in order. And then when we meet as a committee, we review those applications, people ask questions at that time, and then we begin to allocate the funds based on the budget that we have. For those of you who have been with council for a while, you know that we always have more requests for funding than we have funds. And so the review committee has a commitment to try to fund as many groups as possible, and they start at the top, score at highest, and work to the bottom.
And also, we just don't hand the money over. There is a process. They do have to provide reports and such, I would presume.
Yes. So if you are a successful applicant, you will receive a letter. It'll go in the post tomorrow that will tell you the amount you've received. You'll also receive a grant agreement that has been drafted from legal services. You will be required to sign that, typically 2 signatures if at all possible. It comes back and is signed by the CAO and myself, at which time a successful applicant can request 50% of the approved grant amount. to begin with their expenses. In order to receive the final amount, they have to submit a final report. And a final report contains a budget, copies of all invoices that you're looking for reimbursement, and ideally photos of either the event or the community project.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jubenville, followed by Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Amy and group, for all the work that you've done on this. My questions, I guess I'm just expanding a little bit on Amy's questions. So I noticed that some of the agencies or events received the full amount. Some received close to the full amount. Some received about half of what their request was. I'm just wondering if there's any, guidelines that your group follows to determine which ones will receive the full half, along those lines. And I do have another question after this one.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Councillor Jubenville. So similar to how I was explaining the process, once we've identified the final scoring for each group, so in this case I'll do events if I may, we rank them again as highest score to lowest score. And as I mentioned, the review committee ideally wants to be able to fund as many people as possible. So if you have scored the highest, you'll get 100% of your ask, and then we work through the amount of funds we have. So we knew we had about 100,000 in a normal year. We'll go with that example. And so my job as the grant administrator is to present options to the review committee on how best to share those funds through the group. So the particular group, some got 100%, and then it got down to 90%, 80%. Some was down to 50% of what their ask is.
Okay. So my next question is, you mentioned how at the end, I believe you said, after they've received half of the funds, they have to provide receipts and pictures and whatnot. But going further than that, at the very end, do they have to be accountable after they've received the money to say that all of that money that was earmarked towards them is actually going towards what they said it was going to go towards? Like, do they have to provide a detailed accounting to you at the end to say, let's say you granted them $25,000. Here is how I spent my $25,000. Do they provide that to you at the very end in order perhaps to apply the following year? Do they have to provide you with all of that?
You are correct. In order to apply for a subsequent grant with municipality, your final report from any previous years has to be received by us and reviewed and completed. As I mentioned, for any reimbursement, you have to provide copies of invoices. Do I follow up to make sure the invoices are paid? No, I do not. Those invoices, I'm assuming, would be in the name of that event committee or someone from that committee, and it would be their responsible to pay.
Right, but I guess when they're submitting their final, so when does their final report go to you? Does it go to you after or during? Is it like an interim thing, or I'm confused, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So typically, it's after the event or community project has taken place, they provide me with those funds. There's been a couple times where people have had enough invoices that, so for example, community project, the maximum we can give them is 10,000. Therefore, we need 20,000 in invoices. There are times where some groups have such significant invoices, they'll give us 40 and we'll give them that fund. But then with the promise that they have to provide me with a final report. And that has occurred every single time.
Okay, and then they have to provide, you have to have that in hand before they can apply the following year.
Correct.
If they do.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councillor Hall, followed by Councillor Pincinel.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Councillor Finn asked my first question and Councillor Jubenville asked my second question, but I just wanted to thank you, Amy, for the report, and thank you for your responses to those questions as well. Just always very happy to see this report every year. I know when you look at the breakdown, the individual dollar figures are not massive, but they certainly make a huge impact all across our community for the different groups and the different projects that take place. And, you know, it really helps give our communities their identity. So happy for the support tonight and happy to support this tonight. So just thanks again.
Councillor Pinsino?
Thank you, Worship. Amy, I think you and your committee did an awesome job. I look at this list and you've touched every area of Chatham-Kent. And I know that's not an easy job to do when you got limited amount of funds, but really glad it's not our job to do that. It's you guys are doing it. Thanks.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-0. 18B, Fergie Jenkins statue unveiling ceremony.
Councillor Story and Councillor Crew, can I get you to move this, please?
So moved, Mayor Caniff.
I'll second that.
Councillor Story, and then I'll go to Councillor Jubenville.
I think this might be to Amy or to Edward. I'm not entirely sure, so you can fight amongst yourselves and who wants to answer. I did have a couple of questions from the community about the location of where this statue is going to go. I think it's a wonderful idea, and I look forward to the celebrations in June. However, I did receive a couple of questions of why this is going in front of the Civic Center versus going in Rotary Park at Fergie Jenkins Field, and so perhaps we could share that with our community, a little more detail about the location piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Story, for the opportunity to provide clarification to the community about the decision for the location. I think both Edward and I are going to actually volley this question to the mayor, who can actually answer it more and has been, if I may, been having conversations with Fergie, can answer it much more eloquently than Edward and I. Thank you.
Volley received. Okay, so yes, so back on last May, we were in Chicago. We met with the owner and the artist and talked about the statue. So we agreed with that. But the very first thing before I asked anybody, I asked Fergie Jenkins, I said, would you be interested in a statue? And he said, certainly. And as we talked through things, bottom line, this is where he wants it. So we talked about Rotary Park. We talked about things, but I'll go through a few of the things that led to being put out at the Civic Center. First, safety. We've confirmed that one of the cameras that will be downtown will be on this statue. It's 50 yards from the police station. If we put it in Rotary Park, there's nothing like that. And you're gonna have 6 months of where no one's out there. And I know there's a lot of other vandalism that goes on out there as well. It's not the best place to put something as expensive as this. I mentioned the winter months, there's nobody out there. So for 6 months a year, baseball fans would be able to appreciate it, but for 6 months, no one's gonna be there. The other key piece is if we put it at Rotary Park, he's considered a baseball player. He's much more than that to Chatham-Kent. He's a legend. And as we move forward there, that's what we talked about, is saying that we want people to recognize that he's much more than just a baseball player to Chatham-Kent. So by putting it from the Civic Center, it's a much more prominent location. When you're taking pictures, seeing the Civic Center behind it versus seeing trees or something. So that was a big piece of that, as well as we move forward. We're looking at creating a Legends of Chatham-Kent, and that would certainly be the prime piece to start with. But we want to start recognizing not just athletes, not just entertainers. We want to recognize famous people from all walks of life here in Chatham-Kent. So in the next few years, I'd like to, that will be part of the bigger picture, to recognize doctors and various other professions, but that would be kind of that piece as well. But the statue would serve as that. So given all those things, but all those things, if Fergie had said, no, I want it at the Rotary Park, that's where it'd be going. So bottom line, I went with him right from day one and said, where do you want it? And he's made that statement. We talked about Rotary Park for a while. Certainly that was but as we went through all those options, ultimately that's what the decision to put it out for the Civic Center.
Thank you for that explanation.
Councillor Jubenville?
I think it's awesome that we have Fergie and we're able to celebrate him. And my question is just in regard to the finances. sort of vague, so up to $20,000. I'm just wondering, at the end, will there be a detailed accounting provided back to council of how much was actually spent? And so that we know what, what was actually spent on, if it was indeed 20,000 or if it was 15,000 or whatnot?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Jubenville. Absolutely, if that is the direction of council and if that is what Gord would, and he's shaking his head, would suggest, then absolutely we can do that.
That's great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in, motion passes 15-0. 18C, Veteran Memorials Renovations.
Councillor Story and Councillor B. McGregor, can I get you to move this, please?
Happy to move it, Mr. Mayor.
Happy to second it.
Councillor Story?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question about a couple questions. Are any or all of these veterans memorials on municipal property? I'm sorry, I don't know who to direct that to.
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor, to you, Councillor Story. For that question, I believe I may need to defer it to my colleague, Robert Pollock, or Edward. Oh, Robert's coming up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the veteran memorials, it's a combination of some are on municipal property, some are in parks, some are on roadways, and then some's on private property. So there's a mixture. They're not all on municipal property, but a portion of them are, yes.
Thank you. Do the renovations to the Chatham Cenotaph involve more security for the site? I know this report was probably in the works before we had some of the vandalism on that site, so I would love to see that the security is beefed up as part of this work. Thank you.
Thank you through the mayor to the councillor. In terms of security, there has been some discussions with Chatham-Kent Police about this topic. Don't have any particulars I can share with you at this time, but it is something that we're looking at.
Thank you. If you'd come back to council with that, I'd love to learn more when information is available. And last but not least, do we have a plan for veterans memorial maintenance, or is it basically on an as-needed basis?
So it is on an as-needed basis. Usually, if something needs major repair or a total replacement, we would work with like the local Legion or local community groups who have overseen that monument in the past and work with them to try to get it repaired or taken care of. If it's regular ongoing maintenance, just like a cenotaph got vandalized, then we try to do that on an as-needed basis, yes.
Thank you. I know in the report it mentions a federal funding project. Is that a matching piece? I don't think I recall that detail.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't want to misspeak. We do have to contribute. I'm not sure if it's a 50-50 contribution, but they do have an upper limit. But I can share that information with you tomorrow if you'd like, the actual particulars.
That would be great. Thank you. I fully support this. I think I'm a proud Legion member, and I think that as time goes on and the further we get and we lose more and more veterans, that the importance of these sites actually becomes increased as time goes on. So I thank you for bringing this forward and look forward to the results.
I just want to add a couple of things to that. In speaking with the chief of police, yes, there will be a camera being put there in short order. We need to have that in there. That was planned prior to what happened there, but it certainly really puts the exclamation mark on why we need to have something there. And as well, just to note, it deals with memorials across Chatham-Kent. So part of this whole thing is we went and talked to every owner of memorials across the municipality to ensure we're upgrading whatever there is. Some it's a park bench, but we're going to be looking at all of them. So that was part of the motion about a year ago, and I know costing was the big issue. That's why we said, no, we just need to get out and start doing this, because I know that that the Roberts area is very busy in a lot of different projects. So, but just from that, looking forward to getting this thing moving, and it's needed. Thank you. Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Item 19, Finance, Budget, Information Technology, and Transformation.
19D, 2022 record of payment to council-owned vendors.
Councillor Bondi and Councillor Anderson, can I get you to move this, please?
So moved, Mayor Kenneth.
Happy to second.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
I guess this one is an information report.
Record payment it is.
I don't have it in front of me. Yes, she indicates that it's an information report.
All right, well.
20C, Site Plan Control Application 21055, Charing Cross Road, Community of Charing Cross.
Councillor Thompson, you had a question about this information report.
I did, yes, and I appreciate Mr. Jocks being in the audience tonight. This was originally passed in the before times way back in 2021, and just for the residents of Charing Cross, just some clarification. It makes mention of it in the report, but what has changed, and why is this only coming back as an information report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as the report notes, Council dealt with this property under a zoning bylaw amendment application in 2021. At that time, the nature of the zoning amendment was to increase the area on the property subject to the highway commercial zoning. That highway commercial zoning permits a gas bar and eating establishments in that zone. At that time, under the municipal site plan control bylaw, private construction under $2 million were delegated to administration for approval. Over $2 million would always come to council for site plan approval. This project at the time was estimated to be less than $2 million, and so at administration approval, council's desire was to make the approval itself, which would have been the case now. However, on November 28th of last year, the Ontario Planning Act was amended, and one of those amendments was to change the way that municipalities deal with site plan approvals. Prior to November 28th, council had the option of delegating all or part of site plan approvals to administration. The changes in place now make it mandatory that councils must delegate site plan approvals to municipal administrations, and that's across the province, not just in Chatham-Kent.
Of course, thank you. And so when that is delegated to you, so long as it meets planning practices, it passes, it moves forward, correct?
That's correct. So there are a number of, good professional staff that deal with these site plan applications, but there's two major documents that I'll refer to. One is the zoning bylaw. So the zoning bylaw sets out things like number of parking spaces, setbacks from property lines, maximum size of building, etc. And the other important document that the municipality relies on is the Development Standards Manual. The current iteration was adopted by council in 2019. And that Development Standards Manual takes a far more technical view of a property. It will look at things such as drainage, sanitary, sewer service connections, water service connections, lighting, etc.
I very much appreciate this coming back for the information. If council gives the residents of Charing Cross an opportunity to see it, I appreciate that immensely. And I appreciate that council gets a chance to see it. So on issues like this, how would that process work out for residents and council? Will we even know of it? Would there be an information report? How would that work?
It's not current practice to provide information reports every time a site plan's approved. In previous years, if I go from memory, I'd say there'd be around 25, maybe 25 to 30 site plans in any given year. This year, I'd probably expect around that number. In the past, we've sent a sort of an annual summary report, but of course, you know, could be 12 months before council really receives an update and the building could be built at that time.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the time this evening.
We'll move on to notices of motion. Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I, Councillor Anthony Sakachi, will be making the following motion for voting discussion on the April 24th meeting of council. Where it is important that a regular review of processes used by the municipality occur to ensure consistency with best practice in the public sector, and whereas public purchasing processes can be difficult for smaller businesses who do not have a dedicated staff for submitting bids and have other pressures on their business. Now therefore be it resolved, administration take the following steps and return to council with a report outlining recommended or optional changes to council to streamline purchasing process and to reflect best practices of other municipalities and public sector agencies. 1, produce a summary of processes that are in place or could be added to address submission of non-compliant bids. 2, produce helpful documentation for bidders to avoid common pitfalls that can result in non-compliant bids, to be included in tenders where any significant non-compliance has been noticed in previous released tenders. And 3, provided options for council on implementing more active contract assessment management approaches, including costing.
We'll move to communication items. Councillor Crew.
I didn't notice a motion as well.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Apologies. I, Councillor Brock McGregor, will bring forward the following motion for discussion and voting at the April 3rd, 2023 council meeting. Whereas splash pads spread across Chatham-Kent are community infrastructure intended to provide recreation, exercise, and cooling in warm weather. And whereas seasonal temperatures continue to increase with hot weather occurring earlier in the spring and later in the fall in some years. And whereas the Kingston Park splash pad, the only splash pad in the urban center of Chatham, opens 2 weeks later than other splash pads across CK and is well used by residents across the municipality, Council direct administration to review the opening and closing dates of all splash pads in Chatham-Kent with the goal of maximizing seasonal usage, and that these changes be made as soon as possible.
Okay, approval of communication items. Councillor Crew, you wanted to pull item 2A.
Yes, Mayor Caniff. Do you want me to move the communicated items?
Yes, please.
I'll move them, and I'll pull the Ontario Senior of the Year Award.
Councillor Pinsino, can you second that?
So seconded.
Okay, you wanted particular 2A.
Yes, under 2A, the Ontario Senior of the Year Award. This is the provincial recognition for the Ontario seniors. So I would like to nominate last year's Chatham-Kent Senior of the Year for the Ontario Senior of the Year Award. That recipient was Josephine Richardson. So I'd like to nominate her for the Ontario Senior of the Year Award, if I can get a seconder.
Councillor Finn?
Happy to
Anything else?
second that one.
Anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. She's a worthy applicant, winner for Chatham-Kent last year, and it's my pleasure to nominate her this year.
Anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none? And anyone opposed to the rest of the communication items? Seeing none, we'll move on from there. Non-agenda business. Councillor Crew, Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. We are in Ramadan, and I would just like to say happy Ramadan to our community friends who are celebrating that this month. And I would just like to bring greetings from council, and that's it. Thank you.
Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. To keep it short, I have been having a lot of conversations with the community about the dog park initiative that came forth to council just over a year ago. And in talking to Mr. Osoldo, I was just curious to see, instead of having a longer conversation here, I didn't know if it was possible if yourself and maybe your team members can meet with myself, Councillor Thompson, and Councillor Doyle, as there is a very large discrepancy of what was approved by council and what is expected of the community right now. So just looking to have a kind of a detailed maybe meeting so we can hammer out some of these details.
Thank you, through your worship. Most definitely, I'll bring the appropriate staff to the meeting and we can discuss the next steps moving forward.
Thank you.
We'll go, and Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'd also like to add that Ram Navani is happening later this week, which is a significant Hindu festival. So we'd like to wish happy Ram Navani to everyone in our community who is celebrating that. There is the temple in Thamesville on Lemuel Street. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, Councillor Pinsino. And council is invited to that. It's between 9 and 4 p.m. on Sunday. So everyone is welcome to attend that and attend their new temple in Thamesville. Happy Ram Navani. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to first and second reading. Councillor Pinsino and Councillor Bondi, can I get you moved the first and second reading?
So moved.
And so seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Third and final reading, Councillor Thompson and Councillor Hall.
So moved.
So seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Resolution of council, Councillor Crew, and I'll get Councillor Allen to wrap it up for us today.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, April 3rd, 2023, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act. I so move.
Happy to wrap it up.